Hi, everybody. Today we have the privilege of talking with a good friend of mine, Glen Morris. Glen Morris is from down under. He's a Kiwi from New Zealand, and he is one of our leaders of the Asia Pacific leadership team. And Glen, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is with the Navigators?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, so Glen Morris, I'm married to Anne Marie, who's a school teacher. I have four adult children, they're all in their 20s, and I now am a grandfather. So,
Wow.
who would have thought? And I've been with the Navigators for about 28 years, working with campus to start with, and then graduates, then the national director for New Zealand, and then now on the Asia Pacific team for the last 8 years or so.
That's great. Glenn and I have the privilege of working together on doing some things for leader development in Asia Pacific. And Glenn is a very active person on the side. He is also a soccer referee, also known as a football referee, and so he keeps very active. And it's been such fun time working together and learning from you, Glenn. So thanks for taking some time to do this interview for our 315 class. So, could you tell us a little bit about the Asia Pacific region and like what are some of the challenges in the region? Why is this an important region, and what are the navigators up to in this part of the world?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Actually, I am a football referee, and I do explain to people the reason is because I don't get enough abuse at home. So I thought I'd. But no, in Asia Pacific, so half the world's population lives in Asia Pacific, more than half the world's population. But if you ask them to identify what religion do people belong to, something like 93% would say either Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, or folk religion or something else. So maybe 7% or so would identify as Christian, and that's just how they identify.
Mhm.
So for our half of the world, the huge majority of people believe something else. So, and in many of our countries, the number of people who would identify as Christian would be lower. Like 2% is quite a common sort of number. So there's challenges every direction.
Mm. Well, so in your role with the Asia Pacific leadership team,
Mm.
what, how, how many different countries are you involved in, and then how can the small team possibly exert any influence or support to the advance of the gospel in these difficult places? I mean, how do you guys function?
Yeah, I thought we were doing okay until you asked that question, and maybe you're right. No, so we're involved in about 25 countries or so, and uh, um, so with these countries, we've got a team of people. So we've got our Asia Pacific leadership team, which is there's about six of us, and then we have a slightly bigger team, which is a team of mobile alongsiders that together we think about the region as a whole, but then also someone from our team will connect with the people who lead the work in one of the countries that we're involved with. So every national director in a country will have a connection with someone in our team, one or two people. Sometimes there might even be two mobile alongsiders who connect
Hmm.
with them. And so that's how we try and support them. And typically that will mean there'll be some online discussions, but there'll definitely be visits, local visits, and then also we bring people together every year as well. But then we also have so many different. One of the amazing things is there's such diversity.
Mm.
So we would have things like a Buddhist forum or forum for focus people, or just different kind of settings. And when we bring everyone together, even if we take all of the Westerners out of the country, the room, they all still have to speak English because it's the
Mm.
only language that everyone has in common. So there's just a lot of diversity in terms of culture, language, everything, religion. Yeah, but that's the challenge of our team is how do we, such a small team with this, work in these places, how do we support and help what's going on in these settings?
Hmm.
And that's our challenge.
Yeah. I would love to kind of focus on that very challenge, especially as a mobile alongside coming in from the outside,
Mm,
and the diversity of. I mean, you said 93% of the people, half the population of the world, doesn't
mm,
identify as Christian. So a lot of the initiatives that the navigators are doing are really focused on that apostolic pioneering. How do we bring the gospel to places it doesn't normally manifest or grow? How do people cross cultures, cross religious barriers? And so I know you've had a lot of experience in supporting and empowering those kind of pioneer apostolic type leaders. I'd love to hear just about that. If you have any anecdotes, or what's it like for you to come in as an outsider and be with them and see what they're doing and kind of fan into flame what God is doing in that space.
yeah. I, I was in Taiwan uh, one time, and because that's one of the countries that I support. And I'd been there for a few days, and there's just a lot of Chinese language that was being spoken around me. A little bit, a little bit of English because I don't speak Chinese. And I'd been after about 3 days. I just remember, and again, this being hearing this language all the time, and remember thinking, God speaks Chinese. I mean, not just speaks Chinese, but God also thinks in a Chinese way of thinking, because to speak is connected to the way that you think. And I thought, oh yeah, and God is very comfortable in the jokes, the humor, the sights, the sounds, the smells, and it just changed the way I thought. I thought actually, God is so much bigger than I thought, and I
Mm,
know so much less than I thought I knew.
mm,
And so I think when I go to a place, I think now the locals, they know what is, they know
mm,
what is God, the God that they speak to, who's very comfortable in Chinese or Indonesian or whatever language and culture. They will have a much better feel for
mm,
what are the needs of the people. How do they see things?
mm,
How will they ever understand this message? What type of things do they need to hear and see and experience? So I go in now, into a place thinking, so I'm not the expert, but actually the default position is what they're doing is the right way to do things. That's a kind of a
mm,
starting position. And then maybe discuss with them to help them think about it. But they're the experts. So when I come into a place, it very
mm,
much it's so if you were the national director, Mark, of a country, I would be thinking, so how can I help you reflect on what you're doing so that you can come up with a better way to do things? So it's not about what can I bring, you should do things my way. It's
mhm,
rather a sense that actually God has called you to this thing, and in a way that I don't fully understand. But God has
mhm,
given us this connection, this relationship, and God wants me to help you understand what is God saying to you.
mm,
And typically, if God wants to lead the work in whatever country you're the national director for, He's probably not going to tell me. He's
yeah,
going to tell you.
yeah,
So I go in with this thing of, well, how can I help you? What sort of questions would help you think about that, so
mm,
that you can discover what is God saying to you in this whole process.
mm.
I'm not sure if this answers the question. I can't
No,
remember the
that's
question, but yeah.
no, no. But what I heard from you on that was it sounds a lot like a posture of almost a coach in many ways, because you come in not being an expert on the context or what and not knowing where to go forward, but having the skills of really asking good questions and then really listening and seeking to understand what they're doing um, locally. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly we will have a number of different frameworks in the back pocket, and sometimes it might be pulling out some of those to say, well, look, this is something that this other country has used and has found helpful. Is there anything here that might be
Hmm.
useful for you? And we'll probably, will defer to the way that they see things.
Hmm.
So, so we, so on the one hand, we're very responsive. On the other hand, we do have some things as well.
Okay.
Some other, as I say, frameworks or ways of thinking, but but it's more like a menu, perhaps, as
Hmm.
to given the situation that you're in, given who you are, given how God seems to be leading you. Is there anything here that might be helpful? If not, well, let's see. What else? How is God leading you in this? So yeah, I think what you said was a good summary.
Well, I really hear you saying that they keep ownership of the ministry. They keep ownership of the approach, of the strategy, and you are there to support them and to maybe. I love the word menu. You're giving them a menu of some different frameworks or ideas to consider and guide them. So
Yeah.
that's really helpful. I'm curious on this issue of like empowering, especially those who are out on the edge of the kingdom, who are advancing the gospel into hitherto unreached people groups. What are some like pitfalls that you've seen that you yourself may have done, or other pitfalls that other leaders have done in trying to empower those kind of leaders? Have you seen any mistakes made by others, or things that you might be helpful for us to be aware of?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is this idea of pressure of expectations. Um, I mean, last year you and I worked on an Apple Asia Pacific Emerging Leaders leader development. And one of the things we talked about, we had a series of online conversations and then a meeting in person. And one of the things that we talked about early on was this idea of how God led. So the people in the Bible, God led them in different ways at different times.
Hmm.
So how God led Moses and what God asked Moses to do was very different from what God asked Joshua to do, who followed on after him, which was very different from what was asked of some of the kings or some of the people in exile or some of the people returning from exile. And in each situation, God will ask the people involved to lead in a particular way. And so we talked about that in our Apple gathering. And some of the feedback I got on that was that people felt very relieved
Hmm.
because a lot of people, a few decades ago, in a number of these different countries, things were a lot more, very fruitful. People coming to faith, and lots of people were around. And then things got tough, whether for a variety of reasons and variety of settings. But the people who experienced the fruitfulness of the past are still around, maybe, and still kind of in the background there. And then these younger people, the people don't always intend for them to experience this, but they feel some expectations,
Hmm.
especially when things are a lot more difficult. The
Yes.
numbers are not
Yeah.
as high, the conferences are
Hmm.
not as big. So I think they found that actually it was quite a relief to see, yeah, that God actually asked different things of different leaders in the Bible, and so what would ask them to do is not repeat what God had asked the previous generation to do. This
Mm.
is a different setting with its different challenges. And I think that was one of that was a thing is expectations, because I think with that becomes also a freedom to maybe try some things,
Hmm.
freedom to try some things and not get it right. Is something that we kind of go, well, if you're going to try new things, they won't always work out right. So people being able to feel like that's okay.
Hmm.
And I think too, the whole measuring thing is just one of those difficult things. How do we measure if we're doing well? And what's our measuring stick? Again, it's not necessarily going back to the past,
Hmm.
but yeah, maybe it's something different. So those are some of the is
Great.
that the sort of thing?
Oh, really interesting, Glenn. One last question, and then I'll let
Mm,
you go. I'm curious, in the whole framework that you're kind of unpackaging here is empowering them, trusting that they can hear from God, that they will find, as they walk with Him, they're going to have new expressions and in their own context, and it may not be what's been done in the past. And so there seems to be such potential for a great diversity of approaches and contributions with this kind of stance of empowering these leaders. What
mm.
keeps this diversity of leaders connected to one another and to our organization? Like, is that ever a tension? And what are you learning about how to maintain connection and relationship to one another as people move out among the lost?
I mean, you're right. That's so right. Relationships is well, relationships are key. Yeah, everyone says that, but it, genuinely, I think I've seen increasingly over the years that the quality of our relationships together amongst the national directors and their teams in Asia Pacific is getting stronger and I think if we have that sense of okay, we're different, but that's okay. I think that's something that doesn't you can it takes a long time to develop and can disappear very quickly.
Mm.
You make some bad calls, but we work on that, and I think it's just really important. So we'll have, for example, every year we'll have a national directors gathering. Plus, also with some of our team getting around the other countries, they're seeing us in their settings. We're trying to have this posture of a genuine posture of actually we're all in this together, and it's okay, and we actually need different approaches. So, so you're right. The challenges are we have some parts of our work can be very campus based and quite structured. Other parts are a lot more families and relational networks and very unstructured, and they look quite different. So how do we hold those things together? And it's just relationships, and the sense of yes, you're different, but we're for you. And that's what we're trying to communicate. We trust that God is speaking to you and guiding you in this, and has called you to this. So we want to help you in this, whether you're in the campus, highly structured environment, or whether you're out on a limb in another mainstream religion amongst families and where there's actually security issues and you can't really talk about a lot of stuff.
Mm.
We just want to say we trust that you are in this, just as we trust that these other people are in this, and somehow to try and hold it together. There is no magic answer to that, and I think it takes a lot of communicating, a lot of relating, and sometimes misunderstanding because of nature of language and
Yeah.
all sorts of reasons. So it's a constant challenge, and I feel like we're doing okay at the moment. But any given moment, it could be more challenging.
That's good. Well, Glenn, thanks so much for taking your time and sharing with us these learnings and the journey that you and the other leaders from the Asia Pacific region are learning. And this has been great. It's given us a lot to think about.
Thanks, and also just to plug as well. I think for the people who will see this video, it's just to let you know too that Mark and Jin have had a significant involvement in Asia Pacific, helping us with developing our emerging leaders and being part of thinking together with Mark and Jen about leader development. So we're very grateful for them making their contribution into this half of the world that desperately needs help. So Mark and Jen, thank you very much too.
So, yeah. But thanks, Glenn. I didn't expect that. Thank you. Appreciate that, brother. Okay, we'll see you next time.
Okay.